Alrighty, we are here for another episode of Scouting the Cities. I think this is number 10. We're in double digits. If it's number 9, then this is really awkward. But this week we got School of Rock. It's not Jack Black, surprisingly. It's Adam Moreaux, the general manager of School of Rock St. Paul. School of Rock is a school it's a school that teaches kids about music, teaches kids how to be musicians, guitar, keys, drums, you name it. Adam explains it in this episode and how all the classes work and everything. And you know what's interesting is the School of Rock movie, of course, Jack Black. That was one of my favorite movies growing up. It was one of my minivan movies that we played on road trips. Me and my sisters loved that movie. It's just so much fun, right? It's awesome. And the brother in School of Rock, he has gone on to be a director. I can't remember his name. He's a director of huge movies now. He was in Survivor too. There's these awesome clips of him just being hilarious on that show. But anyway, besides the point, School of Rock, the movie, the name, was based on the original School of Rock, the place that teaches people, the one that has led to Adam Moreaux becoming the general manager here in St. Paul and ending up on the Scouting the Cities podcast. So it was this documentary on the school, and then once the School of Rock movie turned into a musical opening on Broadway, all of a sudden it became a legal battle, right? Because that's how the world works. When there's money involved, you want some money, right? So it's found out that whoever owned the name School of Rock, I think it was the actual school owned it, and so there became this legal battle with Paramount and everyone else, all the big hitters. Or maybe there wasn't a legal battle with Paramount. Paramount, don't get mad at me. I'm just a lowly podcaster. Anyway, so there's this whole deal, and instead of paying out millions, they end up coming to a deal that for the Broadway shows or off-Broadway shows that have this School of Rock name, the first people who could audition for the roles in the show were actual kids who went to the schools of rock that were around the cities that these shows were going to be in. So if they're in St. Paul, then School of Rock, St. Paul, they're going to be getting the calls first. And Adam said, we talked about this after because I was too dumb to ask the School of Rock question. But he said after that, one of the first shows on Broadway was pretty much all School of Rock kids. And that's awesome, right? These kids get to learn so much about music and get these life lessons and just have fun, right? After school, just become passionate in something. Everyone loves that. And growing up, you're always trying to find that. Your kids or your parents are trying to throw you into something to hope that it sticks. And I'm sure for a lot of kids at the School of Rock, that's what's happened, especially with the way Adam talks about it, the passion he has, the love for it that you can just tell. And I'm sure these kids are having a blast. There's also a concert he mentioned a little bit in this episode on Saturday and Sunday at Keg and Case in St. Paul. Saturday and Sunday going all day. I believe he said 12 to 6. I'm not positive on that. But if you do want to go check out what these students end up doing, they go out and perform. Go to Keg and Case on Saturday and Sunday after this podcast is released, and check them out. But without further ado, this is Adam Moreaux, the general manager of School of Rock St. Paul. Have fun. All right, so Adam Moreaux, the general manager of the School of Rock.
When you say it like that, it sounds really official.
Yeah,
stuff.
really official.
Oh, bow down.
Whoa.
The general manager.
He's kind of a big deal. So how'd you get into that role?
I started with the school back in college. I started back in 2011. I was going to music college, and it was a quick buck. I was interested in getting into a little bit of teaching and just stayed. It's awesome. I was teaching at a bunch of different studios, and the School of Rock environment was just so different. It was so loud and chaotic and ridiculous. It was well, this is just better. And so I just stayed, and 12 years later, here we are.
Yeah. So where were you in school?
I was in school at McNally Smith. About half the staff at School of Rock are McNally Smith grads.
So where's McNally Smith?
It was right smack dab in the middle of downtown. It folded in 17, I think.
Oh, wow.
So it, we pour one out for it here and there, but that's about it.
So did you start at the School of Rock in St. Paul, the one on Cleveland
Yeah.
still?
Yeah, so we weren't on Cleveland Avenue originally. That school opened in 2006, and it was downtown. So we didn't move it from downtown to Cleveland Avenue until mid 2020.
Oh, wow.
So when everything was shut down during COVID, we didn't have students coming in and out. We were all remote. So we had planned to move, and I was going to have about 4 days to pack up the entire school, put it in a truck, unpack it over here, and get everything put back together. And instead, COVID happened. We all went remote, and I got about 4 months to pack up and move everything. So it was actually a really nice process.
Yeah.
And then we opened in July of 2020 over here, just in time for our first summer camps in the new space.
Well, I mean, it's good that you got that extra time, right?
Yeah. Oh, we would have died. I have no idea how we would have done that in 4 days.
Well, and it's a lot of equipment in there. The space on Cleveland, I came today, and that place is so nice. Oh, my.
We really, really like it. We miss our old building. It was very unique. It was super cool. It was the Allen building downtown, and just a terrific building. We don't miss being downtown in Lower Town as much. Parking is tough. Just downtown things. And we moved over to Cleveland, and it's like, oh, there's parking. Oh, there's foot traffic. And so, you have all these kids every single day. We would watch for the first 6 months, kids just like hanging out the windows of their car, like oogling the school. It's like that. Yep, that's going to be cool.
Yeah.
And it has. The school exploded.
Well, I'm sure it has. Like, do you did it really go up in membership, I guess, or?
We moved over with 85 kids, and last I checked, we had 420.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah, no, it went up a lot.
So then what has that transitional period been like? I guess it was probably a little bit smaller at the start, being COVID, right?
Yeah.
But then now you've got to deal with working with now it's 400 kids, like you said.
There have been a lot of interesting things that we had to learn really fast, and there are a lot of School of Rock locations. There's 300 something worldwide, but not very many as big as we are. We were for a hot second, we were in the top 5. I think we were the 5th biggest school in the world.
That's nuts.
And so you start having these questions come up, like, how do we manage this? How do we make this happen? And the answer kind of echoes back from the others, we don't know. We've never had that problem. And it's totally fine. There are a couple schools that are bigger than us, and everybody in the network is super, super cool. So anytime we're having a problem, we can ask one of the other bigger schools, and they can usually kind of set us toward what works for them, and we modify it a little bit. It works for us too, but it's definitely been, there's been a lot of white knuckling the past 3 or 4 years, just trying to figure out how do we expand programming this fast? How do we find staff? How do we, and all great problems to have.
Right? Yeah. I mean, having more kids in to learn how to play is not a bad thing.
Yeah, and those kids, they really will teach you the meaning of fun. It's just wild all day, every day. There, you've got a group that's rehearsing in one of the rooms, and the other group in the other room is taking a break, and so they're out in the lobby, and everybody's in a great mood, because why wouldn't you be in a great mood? You get to learn instruments, play in a band, and so everybody's just the energy level is so high all the time. And I think back to other lesson studios that I've worked in that are a lot more classically oriented, where kids would come in with their instruments and they'd unpack and they'd sit and wait in the hallway very quietly, very politely. They'd go in and they have their lesson, they come out and leave. And then I come to work and it's oh, there's 3 kids sitting in the lobby that have been here now for the last 4.5 hours because they're doing a camp, and then they've got a class tonight because they're regular students too. So they're going to be here all day, and they are just partying it up. Everybody's having lunch. Everybody's having a good time. They're working through tunes that they're learning. They're working through quick instrument repairs as needed, and it's a very wild, hectic, fun environment.
It's got to be fun to see you see those like light bulb moments with probably the instruments, and then you kind of see like friendships being made too, right?
Yeah. There's a huge social component to it. They work really, really hard. All the kids, they really dig in on their instruments, but it's very different from like a school environment where the impetus to do that is all internal. Like the kids who are going to practice are going to practice, and the kids who aren't. At School of Rock, there's a big social component to that too. So when you walk into a group and there's 60 people and all of them are playing the same song, that's, you can hide a little bit. When you walk into a room and there are 7 people and all of them are playing different instruments and everybody's working on the same thing, like there's nowhere to hide. Like you either practiced or you didn't. So there are always kids that walk in and for one reason or another haven't practiced whatever, but nobody ever needs, a scolding. Nobody ever needs a shaming because they play and they're like, oh, I really want to be on top of this next week. And that motivation is so, I don't know it's so intrinsic to what they're doing because they don't want to let their classmates down, and their classmates, they're all very supportive of one another, but they put in the work over and over and over.
Well, it's like, I grew up kind of going to a gym and stuff, and like you always had like your gym buddy, right? And so like if they're going in and you're not, you're like, oh, I kind of let them down. So you keep going, and it's kind of like that sort of thing.
It's the exact same mindset, except you have 9 gym buddies and you've got 4 months of just hardcore working with them every single week.
Yeah, so you want to sound as good as you can. So can you explain sort of the setup to School of Rock, like how classes work, how lessons work? What is, if say I'm a 15-year-old and I want to start playing, like what would you recommend for me, right?
Yeah, totally doable. So the way we start everybody is we have them come in for a trial lesson because every single person is their own set of variables. We don't charge anything for the trial lessons because honestly, it helps us as much to answer those questions right away as it helps you. It's a mutual benefit thing. So,
and those are one-on-one?
Yep. Trial lesson is usually you sit down with our music director, Benny, and we just go through a bunch of stuff. First of all, we want to know you as a student, right? We want to get to know, what are the things that make you tick? What kind of music are you into? What do you? But then we also want to know, what's your existing skill set? And a lot of times you do get kids who are complete beginners, right? Like I can identify a guitar on sight, but I've never played one, and that's totally fine. But even in that, especially with kids who are a little bit older, into their teenage years, they might not have any guitar skills, but they might have taken piano lessons when they were 8 for a little bit, or they might have been working in school band. They might have, and a lot of those skills are very foundational. So even if they have no clue what they're doing on a guitar, there's a pretty good chance that they know more than they think they do just because of something they have already done. And then with younger kids, they probably don't even have that level of experience. And if you're a complete blank slate, that's almost easier because there's no bad habits anywhere to be erased. Like we get to just start from the beginning. So either way, like what happens during that trial lesson is we kind of poke and prod and figure out where you are. Based on that, we'll say, okay, so here's what your trajectory looks like. Maybe you should be taking lessons and no group for the next month or 2 months or whatever it is. And then knowing what the trajectory of those lessons will look like, you should be looking to start into a group at this point, and this is about the class level you're starting into. So we have different class levels that are kind of based around skill and age, and because a lot of that is social development, right? It's not just can you play this. A 15-year-old starting guitar for the first time is going to learn at a vastly different rate. The curve is going to be very different than an 8-year-old starting guitar for the first time, right? You don't want those two in the same class, and they don't want to be in the same class. One of them is going to be super intimidated, and the other one is just going to rage quit because, like, I'm in class with an 8-year-old. Why would I do this? So there's a lot of that goes into it, and we kind of thread that needle real carefully, trying to make sure that everybody ends up where they are going to get the most out of it starting right away. So it's very personalized.
Yeah, and with so many students, how do you guys sort of navigate that? Like what is your team looking like? Like how many workers are there? And
Yeah, we keep a really small instructor roster. Like I want to say we have 20 total employees at the school. That includes camp instructors who are different from our regular lesson instructors. Lesson instructors are all also running group classes, so there's a lot of intermingling. The big secret sauce there for us has been we only hire instructors who can teach at least 3 instruments, because multi-instrumentalists, they're harder to find, but when we bring them in and they already have a roster of kids waiting for them, they stay and they're much more invested. So it's not just like I walk in and teach for an hour and then leave. Like when our instructors are there, they're like there for the day. So they're very invested in the school. They're very invested in the success of their kids. They're invested in their classes. They understand what the kids are doing in class because a lot of them run similar classes of their own. So there's a lot of, I hate the word synergy, but sometimes it has to actually be used. It just makes everything a lot more cohesive when everybody, as part of their training, starts sitting in on classes and lessons. Even for instruments they don't teach, they'll shadow lessons because they all run classes, so they have to be able to talk to kids who play instruments that they don't necessarily play. So they all develop kind of a baseline skill set on every instrument that we teach at the school, and then most of them play a million others too.
Yeah, and then so these group classes, and then now you have camps in the summer. What are those like? Is that sort of based on age group or talent level?
Yeah, it's a little bit both. So kind of in the same vein as we are working to make sure that the kids are in the right place socially as well as skill-wise, the camps are broken up basically the same way. The difference is a class is going to run for like 16 weeks is one season. A camp is going to run for 5 days. So you are with your group 3 hours a day for 5 days. There's no individual lessons happening. There's no anything. You are in this group, you're working with this unit for a week, and then at the end of that week, you perform. And the performances are fun. We do all of those ones, the camp performances, right there at the school. One of the walls, you might even have it in your video, the big glass wall, that pulls out.
Oh, wow.
So then the rehearsal room becomes the stage, and then you have a full audience of camp parents, and it's always packed. And that's where the camp performances happen. So it's a lot lower pressure. It's a great way to dip a toe in without jumping full force into a 16-week class without knowing that that's a thing you want to do. Because a season-long class, it's a ton of fun, but it is a huge commitment. You know, when you start it, it's like any other sports team, anything else. Like, you're in.
Yeah, and how often are those classes? Like, are they daily or like
weekly?
Weekly. Okay.
Yeah.
Once
So
a week.
when you're in any of the group classes, you're meeting once a week for rehearsal, and then you'll have, over the course of a 4-month season, you'll have 2 performances. You'll have a mid-season after 2 months and an end-of-season performance at the end of your 4-month season.
And what are those performances like? Because I know I work at the Saints, and you guys performed outside of the gates one time.
That was one
awesome.
of our, it was tons of fun. So that was one of our touring groups. We have 2 of those, but the regular performances, the season performances, we have one even coming up this weekend, and it's going to be over at Keg and Case. They are massive. Usually we expect, between 1,100 and 1,300 people at them, spread over the course of a couple of days. But we'll have 30 bands hit the stage in 2 days, and the real young ones, they're playing shorter sets of songs that have been kind of specially arranged for their skill set, right? All the way up through the touring kids who are just hog wild. I mean, they're great musicians. So it's a huge spectrum, and there's people coming and going all the time. It's a big party. It's 2 days long, and it's just nonstop.
I'm sure that's really fun for the kids too, to get that experience on stage as
Always.
well.
And a lot of them, I think it's very similar to anybody else. Kids, they'll come to the school and they're like, I want to do lessons and maybe rehearsals, but I'm not going to get on stage. We used to argue with them, right? We used to say, like, yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. Now we just say, okay, because I know way better than they do that when it comes time to get on stage, they're going to be like, maybe I will. And then they'll walk up on stage and they're just hooked. Like there's no feeling in the world like it, and they will chase that high forever because it's so cool to be on stage performing. Even the ones that swear up and down sideways that they will never ever get on stage, the second you get them on stage, they're hooked. They're super all about it.
And then what's that feeling like for you as an instructor? You see these kids go from, like kind of shy, I guess, probably a lot of them, to getting up on stage and performing and being just better musicians.
Oh yeah. I ran a class a while back that was a System of a Down class. So if you're not familiar, it's like a alternative metal band, I guess we would call System of a Down. Super fun, really wild, raucous music. It's crazy stuff, and it's really technical. It's very challenging music. And one of the kids in that group, I had known her since she was, 11 or 12. I think she probably came to us. And for the first 3 months, mind you, this was a vocal student. And I had her for lessons. And for the first 3 months I knew her, I didn't hear her make any sounds. Not she was kind of shy. Like, I did not hear her speak. I did not hear her sing. Like, we did, doing 3 months of voice lessons with a kid who is too shy to sing, it is tough. You just slog through it, and you try and try and try, and you try all these different things. And finally, little by little, they start to get comfortable enough. Singing especially is very vulnerable, right? They have to trust you enough to make sounds in front of you, which for some kids takes about 8 seconds. For this kid, it took 3 months. And we got her there, and then one of her last shows was the System of a Down show, and she's jumping all over the stage and like smashing into the other people on stage, screaming, and I'm just having the time of her life. She was so good, and it was just jaw-dropping because I personally had gotten to watch that transformation happen, and it's fun for the other people who worked with her along the way too, because I didn't work with her for all that long. I probably only worked with her for 6 months directly in lessons, but I still knew where we started, and so getting to see that was like, all right, so that this worked, this was good, and that seeing transformations like that is a lot of fun. And sometimes it's not a transformation. You get some kids that walk in at 8 years old knowing I am a born performer and this is what I'm going to do. And it just turns out they're right. And like, that's super awesome too, because they take what already is a set of talents and tendencies and they just hone them. And so many of them are so focused and they're so aggressive about their workflow that you watch these kids do things that I, at 11, 12, 13 years old, could never have imagined myself doing, let alone pulled off. And it's like, let's go.
Well, I remember at the Saints, because I was scanning tickets before the game, before I get into like my actual work, but then seeing like the group you guys had, it was like, there was 3 singers. One was like maybe 15. One was like 8. It was so cool to see like how the confidence was there for him too.
Oh yeah,
like that's awesome.
It really, really is, and you always find that you are underestimating them, like no matter what. And we, knowing what they are capable of, still find that we're underestimating them every time we think, we've reached the limit. They're not going to be able to pull this off. Somebody comes along and proves us wrong. Doesn't always happen right away, but we, as a music teacher, you start to get cocky from time to time. You start to really think like, I can look at a kid and tell you exactly what's going on. You can't. Like, there's always a kid out there who is going to come and just smash all of your preconceived notions about what they're capable of. And when it happens, it is just the feeling that you get watching a kid do something that you never thought they would be capable of, but they went for it anyway, and then they just wreck it, and it's like, wow.
I bet it's really rewarding, a rewarding job for you.
It is. It's one of those things where I am not a teacher by nature. It's never what I wanted to do. It was never a thing that interested me. It just kind of something I fell into by accident. I'm very good at it, but I never expected to enjoy watching students develop and it just kind of, it always catches me by surprise when I'm standing at the shows, and it's like, oh, I remember where you started. That was awesome right now. And it's like, wait, was that actually me? Like, am I super into this? Turns out, yes, I super am. And the kids just crush it over and over and over. And it's just the work environment like that, when that is the payoff.
Mm-hmm. Can't beat it, right?
You can't.
So where did you start then? Were you like in bands yourself?
Yeah, still am. And my whole education was focused on being a session musician. Like that was really where I saw myself. And I do a lot of session work. But I had no interest in teaching whatsoever. And I think a lot of the instructors at School of Rock would say the same. Like, it's something they kind of fell into by accident, or somebody was like, hey, you should go pick up a gig here for a while or something. And all of them stay, because it is very rewarding work.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, you can't beat it, right? Like, seeing that growth. I mean, just hearing you talk about it. So I know you mentioned like having different types of classes with different types of music.
Yeah.
How do you get students into different types of music? I feel like a lot of time when I was, that age, I was like, I'm listening to, this, right?
Yeah.
Like whatever's on.
Absolutely. And we catch a little bit of a break there anyway, because I think a lot of the students that come to us that kind of turn into the tastemakers at the school, we attract a lot of weirdos, right? I mean, this is the place where the people who really rise to the top of the student body at School of Rock are the people who are they're a little bit goofy. They are very creative. They're very talented. They're wired a little bit different. And those kids, it's very easy to get them turned on to something new because they actively want to be. And then there are other kids who are totally like you just described, right? They just shut down. They're like, this is what I like, and this is the only thing I like, and this is the box. They won't ever take it from me, right? If I tell them like, oh, Dave Matthews Band, you need to check out Dave. Like, they'll look at me like I am a lunatic.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other kids at the school who they have already like really put up on a pedestal in their minds because they're very talented, they're very cool. At School of Rock, they're very top of the pile. And if those kids mention some Dave Matthews song that they were listening to, they're super into, all of a sudden it just snaps right that fast. And we do it all the time. We nerd out on folk musics. I ran a class for a while on different world musics and different folk musics, and I had an entire group of kids that was just crazy for like Ethiopian jazz fusion for a hot minute.
Yeah.
Because they want to get into new things. They want to expand their horizons. And so the kids that don't, they'll never follow me into that expansion, but they will absolutely follow other kids into that expansion.
Well, yeah, that was how I was too, right? You follow the leader. You see, what I mean. Well, I had two older sisters growing up, so it was like that's kind of how
you kind of had like all the cool stuff. You were like, I know what's hip right now.
Yeah, and then my one sister's like, you got to start wearing snapback hats. You got to start. Here's Lil Wayne.
Yeah.
Let me put you on.
Yeah, and you became instantly a huge fan of snapback hats and Lil Wayne.
Yeah,
I'm guessing.
of course,
but if your parents had said like, have you heard of snapback hats and Lil Wayne, you'd have been like, I am never.
Have you heard of this Lil Wayne fella? Wheezy?
Yeah, and you would have been like, please never talk to me again. So
yeah.
it's funny the people that we will allow to influence us in different ways and to introduce us to different things. But really, as long as you can kind of trace that as a teacher, as long as you can kind of trace like who is going to really pick what up from who, you can open up everybody's horizons in a room just by understanding how it's going to propagate from one person to the next.
I'm sure you've seen some like success as well, like from kids as they've moved on, like going into college.
Yeah.
Have they started their own bands? Have they started putting out music themselves and everything?
Tons of them.
Yeah.
So there are a fair few of them that have even come back to teach. Like a couple of our instructors right now were students just years ago. I have worked in bands with former School of Rock students. Like, it's really easy to hire them as session musicians and as stand-in players because I know exactly how they were trained. Because I did it. And I know that they're going to show up on time because that's what we taught them how to do. So sometimes, in a lot of situations, kids that I teach right now are going to become my go-to musicians years down the road because they are really talented, they're really reliable, and they're just awesome to be around. Like, I genuinely enjoy being around them.
How does the school also like kind of serve as a way of helping kids grow up? Because I know, like, for my coaches always in sports would say, this isn't just hockey. This is, we're teaching you life lessons. And I'm sure it's the same thing because,
totally
these are
is.
band kids instead of hockey players, right?
Yeah, and I think as a kid, you are by default taking life lessons from everywhere, right? Anything you're doing is life lessons. But when you're working at School of Rock, you're taking on, like, you're working with a lot of other really creative kids. So for a lot of the kids there, it's an environment that they don't necessarily have access to at school. They don't, there are always clusters and cliques at school, but it's you don't have an entire school full of people who are creatively minded, musically minded. So that's a cool cultural thing for them. But they pick up a lot of things because we're very, very precise about lessons always start on time. Lessons always end on time. Rehearsals never start a minute late. Kids have to set up all of their own equipment. So there's when we're teaching them how to put this equipment together, we time them. Like, they drill on it. It's like, set the room up. You have 5 minutes. Tear it down. You've got 2 minutes. Set the room up. You've got 3 minutes. They get really, really good at it. So aside from just the musical skills, they really do learn a lot about working with groups of people and working with different people one-on-one and being part of a combo, being part of a team, being part of a group that has a common goal, and seeing that, because they're kids. It doesn't always work well, right? Every kid has their moment where they're like, well, I am going to torpedo this whole thing today, because of course they do. They're children, right? But you can talk to the older ones and they can look back and tell you, like, oh yeah, I remember a rehearsal I torpedoed. And it's not the rehearsal. Like, a lot of them can't even tell you what songs they were working on then. That's not the part that sticks. The part that sticks is, like, I was super unprepared and showed up on time, and it just did not feel great. I have never done it since. And it's the same thing that they'll find, the same core life lessons that they'll find in sports teams. It's just sports teams don't always work as the vessel for those lessons for every kid. So for the kids that doesn't work for, I find a lot of them end up with me, and they get all the same lessons, and they get them in an environment that just is much more comfortable for them.
Yeah. Have there been any specific moments that stand out to you watching kids perform or watching kids grow? I know you mentioned, like, the one who wouldn't speak for 3 months, right? Like, have there been any other things like that?
Oh yeah. There are 7 or 8 of those for me a year. There was one group that I worked with. This was years ago. I want to say this was 2015. And this was one of the touring groups. So the kids who, like, auditioned into this group, they were pretty high end. But a lot of those kids I had been working with since they were pretty young. And I had them doing a disco show. And it was a very small group, but they had recruited some other people because they wanted a horn section. And I was like, well, guess what? I don't have one. And so they were like, okay, hang on. And so they made a bunch of phone calls, and they came back the next week, and there were 2 extra kids. I was like, hi, who are you? Where did you come from? And they like got them enrolled, and so they brought in their friends. And I started to figure out, like, did these kids just go out and recruit a horn section? And they totally had. So all of a sudden I had this disco show, and it had a horn section, and the kids were just crushing it, and they were learning all their dance moves, and it was fun. And I got to the show at the end of that, whatever, month and a half period that they had been working on it. And I set up all their stuff, most of it before they even got there, just, part of the job, whatever. And they started showing up in white 3-piece suits, every single one of them. And I walked in, I was like, what? And like one of them walks in platform shoes that he had borrowed from his uncle, who just had them in his closet from the 70s, and they just happened to fit. So like white 3-piece suits, platform shoes, and they crushed it. They absolutely destroyed that show. And the venue that we were working with for it just thought it was the greatest thing ever. And like I had a packed house of all their parents, and they invited all their friends because they knew how hard it was going to slap. So they invited all their friends too, and it was monumental. I think it was one of the best shows that I have ever seen, let alone been part of, because they were just so high energy. And there's a sort of energy that kids bring to a stage that adults always wish they could bring to a stage, but physically can't. Like, I gotta tell you, I play like a monster, but I also, I'm 34. I get hot. I get sleepy, right? It's a thing.
Yeah.
But teenagers who are super amped by crowd energy, like, they were giving each other piggyback rides, like spinning on stage, one of them, swinging a mic over her head, and like there was a saxophone solo happening. It was chaos in the absolute best way. And it was like, this is a performance that I wish I was on stage for, and they're not all that, but for the kids who are on stage, they are all that. When you're on stage and you're in front of a crowd that's super into it, it doesn't matter if you are plunking out root notes, trying to whack your way through a Leonard Skinner tune that only has 2 chords. Like, you feel like you're at the top of the world. So even the little ones get that feeling. And then to watch the older ones actually get that feeling because they are creating that level of performance, that's mind-blowing.
Taking that energy and turning it back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Throwing it back on the stage. I bet that concert sounds unreal.
Oh, it was wild.
Like the white suits, I can see it now.
Yeah,
perfect.
Every one of them showed up looking like Barry Gibb. And
Yeah,
it's just like, why? How? And because they had all just decided, like, this is what we're doing. They ordered these.
They went for it.
They ordered these suits on like Amazon.
Yeah, of course.
And they showed up and it's like, this is amazing.
Yeah, I mean that is unreal to be able to see that. Oh my God, that would be. I'm sure it was an electric show too. Everyone probably loved it.
Oh, it was a blast.
Because when you see people commit like that, you're committing as a crowd member too.
I think it's impossible to be at a show like that and not dance. Like I never want to meet the person that can be at a show like that and sit at a table and like clutch a drink and just stare. Like, you can't do it.
No.
That's a willpower that nobody should have.
Yeah, you got to get moving. So on the back end of things, as the general manager, you're organizing all these classes and everything, making sure people are you have instructors for everything. How challenging is that? Has that sort of drawn you away at all? Has there ever been moments where you're like, man, this is tough, this is hard?
Yeah, just like any other business, there are the upsides and the downsides, and as the person in charge of it, I see the downsides when they happen. I will say that I have, in what I would argue is probably one of the least fun jobs at the school, I have more fun in a day than most people have in their entire careers. Like, the environment is just awesome. It has its days, right? There are days when my day is a 13-hour just slog fest trying to get through everything that I need done, trying to solve some weird problem that came up, some piece of equipment broke or fried or whatever, and I'm trying to either fix it or replace it on the fly. And there are days, right? Luckily, I have clients that are awesome. Like every single one of the clients at the school, in a group of 420 clients, you have to expect that like 20 of them are going to suck. And they don't. They're just like across the board. They're just super awesome people. Like they're people you genuinely want to stop and like have a conversation with, which is sometimes problematic because like I've got stuff to do that I'm totally ignoring because I really want to actually just like have a conversation with this. But so I've got that going for me, and then the team at the school, from the administrative team on through the instructors and everybody, everybody is so great to work with. They're just we hire pretty carefully, and we hire when we need to, so we don't have people who work with us who are just sort of like a foot out the door all the time. Like the people who work there, they love what they do. They work really hard. They do a really, really good job. And when you have a group of people working under you that brings that kind of energy, my job gets so much better because I get to just mostly deal with the fallout of all of these people being really good at their jobs. Like,
yeah, right.
That's a pretty easy day.
Yeah, and then you get to see the good parts at the end of it, right? The concerts, the the white suits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So overall, I guess how many different types of musicians do you have? You have vocalists, you have guitars, like what?
Yeah, so
piano, keyboards, and everything.
We teach at the school. We teach guitar, bass, keys, voice, drums, and ukulele. Each of those kind of is its own world, right? I mean, there's a million different styles and techniques to learn with every single one of those instruments. Drums in particular are really tough because you start out, you walk in and you're like, I'm going to play drum kit, and then somebody puts you in front of congas and you're like, oh, I have to learn to do this too. And it's always fun to kind of watch reality wash over the drummers who thought they were just going to like sit down and only ever touch a drum kit. It's like, no, we're not going to teach you to only live in one tiny corner of this world. Like, we're going to teach you how all of this works. But so those are the 6 disciplines that we focus on right now, and we're hoping as we grow to be able to expand into horns and strings and even music production stuff. So we're crossing our fingers that we keep growing the way we are and kind of work our way into those opportunities too.
Yeah, right. And so what do you think the future is like for the School of Rock? Because music is, changing like everything else, right? And there's
Always.
a lot more that you can do on the computer and everything, right?
Well, and that's one of the things that we keep talking about is like, is it time for us to get into electronic music production as as a class, as an area of study? Because a lot of the instructors are pretty well versed in it. Most of us are studio musicians. A lot of us are producers and engineers. Like it's just, that's our background. That's because that's the people that we hire. So, pardon me, it's hard to say what the future holds. Every single one of those branches has its own big questions and challenges and hurdles, but we're definitely, as I think, we stay focused on our core strengths and keep the school really strong, keep doing a really excellent job there. And then as we get to branch out, we have the support of a really strong school to get to experiment a little bit with figuring out where we go next.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've been used to experimenting with things as a musician, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's every day is another dream and scheme, and those meetings are fun. They're maybe a little bit more fun immediately than the sit down and plot out the logistics for the next 4 months and figure out, how many trucks we need to rent for this show, whatever. But at the end of the day, we get to do both, and being able to do both and having a team that's able to do both means that we keep delivering really great shows, really great experiences for the kids. We get to work with really cool venues, and so it keeps us on our toes, but it keeps us good at what we do and keeps us strong.
Well, it's good to see the culmination at the end, I'm sure.
Yeah, always is.
So 2 final questions.
Yeah.
What is your favorite song? Do you have a favorite song?
Oh man, today my favorite song is Head for Supplies by a group called Elbow that's out of the UK. Just one of those kind of hit me right at the right time, perfect harmonies, just like everything stacks really well together and it grows over time. So it starts out as like this almost nothing little guitar riff, and it just like keeps growing and keeps getting added to until it just like explodes and ends perfectly. So tomorrow it'll be a completely different, who knows.
Yeah, that's how it goes, right? Yeah. And then, do you have a favorite movie?
Ooh. I'm gonna get judged by anti-nerd
That's what
circles
everyone
for this,
says
but
when I ask this question.
I'm super into Serenity, which is like this totally under the radar space cowboy thing. There was a show called Firefly, and they made a movie out of it. But the cast is amazing. It's all people who have gone on to be like super crazy famous, and they just crushed it. It's really great writing, really great concept and production, and it's like my comfort show. It's my go-to show, and the movie is just perfection.
All right, Serenity, I'll have to check it out.
It's great.
Okay. Well, Adam, I appreciate you for coming on. I think it was great.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah.